Joining me now is Robert Papp, director of the Chicago Project on Security and Threats, and Eddie Glaude, Princeton University professor and MSNBC contributor. Robert, I know you've been conducting polls measuring Americans' attitudes toward political violence for years now. From your research, where are we?
We are more radicalized as a country than at any time in the 4 years that we've been conducting quarterly surveys of support for political violence among Americans. Our most recent survey in May found that 39% of Democrats believed that the use of force was justified to remove Donald Trump from the presidency. We also found that 24% of Republicans supported the use of the U.S. military by Donald Trump to suppress protests against the Trump agenda. We also know from further detailed polling that when we say the use of force, 55% of those respondents mean lethal force in the form of assassinations, shootings, etc. This is much higher than we have found in our previous surveys, and this is why in June I warned in the New York Times we're on the brink of major political violence, and I'm sorry to say we're crossing that threshold, those watersheds now.
So, Eddie, which leads us to the questions that the governor just asked. We heard him ask, is this what 250 years has wrought us? Is this it? Where are we now, Eddie, as you see it?
We're at a very dangerous point. I think what Professor Papp just laid out for us kind of is a way of unpacking, Chris, that we've forgotten how to disagree. And we've forgotten how to disagree while we're awash in guns. There's a long tradition over this 250 years of political violence in the United States. But we're in a moment where there's a kind of convergence of that fact with the contraction of the public square, where people can engage in reasoned deliberation and debate and disagree. Instead of having citizens disagree with each other, Chris, we got enemies holding each other with contempt. Remember, July 3rd, Donald Trump said, "I hate them." July 5th, J.D. Vance said, "They hate you." Right? So there's a sense in which we have enemies drawing lines, rhetoric that isn't just about intense kind of caricatures of opponents, but rhetoric that really feeds on grievance. So we've forgotten how to disagree, and we have weaponry, right, to express those disagreements. It seems to me we're in a very dangerous place, Chris, as a country.
Well, Robert, the New York Times says the reaction to this shooting on social media fell into well-worn grooves. Prayers for the victim's life, condemnation of political violence, and sharply partisan takes. You know, when we talk about the convergence of things, are we in this place potentially because civil discourse, because the opportunity for us to talk to each other and disagree often falls behind the ability of people who feel the grievance deeply and may have a propensity toward taking it out, toward violence, can go into a place in social media or somewhere on the web or find people they wouldn't have been able to find before?
So my research shows that, yes, the rhetoric is a big problem. Incendiary rhetoric on both sides, by the way, is a big problem. But there are actual social reasons and social change reasons behind it. Studying political violence for 30 years around the world, social change of a big nature often leads to major political disruption and political violence. Here in the United States, we are going through a historic change for the first time in our country's 250-year history of moving from a white majority democracy to a white minority democracy. That's been going on for years, but we are now in the throes of what I call the tipping point generation, which started about 10 years ago, and that accounts for the meteoric rise of Donald Trump and why his signature issue was stopping immigration, because a lot of people on the right want to stop that social change from occurring. And also the virulent reaction by parts of the left to that Donald Trump and that movement, because many of them want to continue, possibly even accelerate that change. So that's the underlying factor. And that's why deplatforming people from social media isn't mattering here, because there are actual social change reasons explaining this. And I'm sorry to say, that's why I've called this the era of violent populism. And this will be another 10 years before we make that transition to a white minority democracy. So we really need to take this much more seriously and not think everything is just the violence going to fade away, or it's a one-off, or it's just a problem on one side of the aisle or the other. This is the core reason we are in the thick of it now.
So, Eddie, you and I have talked in other ways about that core reason, about violent populism. Where does that leave us as people, once again, say we have to figure out how to stop this?
Well, I think we have to be honest with ourselves. It's going to be very difficult to do it now, because we're dealing with the fact that someone is dead, that children are going to grow up without their dad. We can't deal with the political disagreements we may have. We have to deal with the fact of life here and the fact of death here. But we have to be honest with ourselves, it seems to me. And what Professor Papp has just laid out is true. I mean, right now, Virginia, historically black colleges and universities in the state of Virginia are shut down because of bomb threats. There are rumors that there are bomb threats at Clark Atlanta University. Why? Because of the murder of Charlie Kirk? I don't know, but that's what's happening right now in real time. And then you have, at the same time, you have a discourse, Chris, of the sin of empathy, of toxic empathy, of trying to deepen the divides as people justify their expressions of hatred. We have to be honest about where we are as a nation. And that's going to be hard to do in these immediate days. But if we don't, in the near future, we may seal our fate.
Robert, for some people, maybe just of a recent age or people who know history, this is a little bit uncomfortably reminiscent of the political violence in America in the 60s. JFK, RFK, Martin Luther King, Medgar Evers. Does your research tell us anything about what it takes to pull back from political violence, or with root causes maybe being different, there aren't lessons to be learned?
So, yes, the 1960s were another example of what I call another era of violent populism, but the factors driving it were different. One of the key factors, of course, was race, but we had success with the civil rights movement. We had success in 1964, success in 1965 that helped. Did it solve everything? Absolutely not. But those were moments of true success. We also had an issue with the Vietnam War, and ending conscription in 1973 was a way to weaken that driver as well. Then there's others as well. So we had different issues socially. And today, however, we have a different set of issues. The number one thing I would say is that this is a crucial watershed moment for our political leaders to stand up and to restrain their own constituents. We've been blaming each other, of course, a lot. That means Democratic leaders need to restrain what we're seeing on social media, all the celebratory videos here that we're seeing of celebrating the death of Charlie Kirk. We need people condemning that. We also need people on the right condemning the idea of anger and then acting out violently against Democrats. We need the specific issues of violence condemned by by leaders on both sides.
Robert Papp, Eddie Glaude, thank you both. Two great people to have in this moment, and I'm sure that the conversation will continue.